This is Gibraltar today. We're going to talk about Action for Housing now, because they have called on the government to deliver on their commitment for a halfway home for men. Action for Housing says that following the breakdown of a marriage, it is usually men who leave the family home and are sometimes made homeless. And we welcome into the studio the pressure group's Henry Pinna now. So, Mr. Pinna, you're pointing out that there is currently support in place for women in the event of marital breakdown and them needing a bed. There is such a facility for women, but not one for men, despite it being promised.
Let me put this in context. If I remember correctly, we brought this up with the late Hubert Corby, when he was Minister for Housing. That was many years ago. Since then, we periodically bring it up because we do have homeless men. I mean, we don't see people sleeping rough here in Gibraltar as you might see them in Madrid or London or Paris, because we are a small community, and those who become homeless are taken in by relatives or by friends. But the fact is that we do have homeless people. In fact, at the moment, we have on our list 15 homeless individuals. 3 are females and 11 are males. And as I've said, they have a cared of address. They stay with friends or relatives.
On a sofa, maybe?
On a sofa, or a few days here and a few days there, but they haven't got a place of their own. Now, in October 2020, the government announced the construction of a hostel comprising 665 beds on the MOT site. The idea was to house what they called key workers, but also a number of beds would have been earmarked for homeless men. And then that was shelved. And in August last year, they announced a hostel comprising 256 beds in over 110 rooms at the Europa Point area.
¿Y qué pasa? That's not going ahead either,
Again, that has been
or it's
shelved.
parked, no, at least? It's
Well, parked means not being done. When they say parked, it's an euphemism of saying that it won't be done. So we have now written to the minister asking her whether they have any plans to construct a similar hostel which would cater for whoever workers who might need it, but also earmarking a number of rooms for homeless men. We have a halfway house for women, but not such a facility for men. And we think it is highly needed. I mean, as I've said before, we have a number of homeless men who have nowhere to go. And this would be a temporary shelter until they are given proper housing by government. It takes a long time because you've got to register as a social case, been homeless, blah, 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 and that takes time. In the meantime, these men would be able to stay in a place where they live comfortably and not having to depend on relatives or friends.
Now, space in Gibraltar is difficult to come by, but even if there were to be a building earmarked and sort of handed over, made available for the purpose of a halfway home, it would need to be run by somebody, because if we look at the Women's Refuge, there's a charity that looks after it, Women in Need. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on how it would operate? Would it be a similar model, do you think?
I mean, that I think would be the least of the problems. The thing is to start doing it, to construct it, and then we can put our heads together and see how it can be run. It can be run in various different ways. But the big stumbling block that we have now at the moment is that we want to know whether the government has any plans to do it. And that's why we're asking the minister to say publicly whether she intends to construct such a facility or not, and if so, when.
Okay, and to be clear, this sort of halfway home as a facility, it would provide a bed, running water, electricity, but it would be what, like a temporary accommodation to sort of avoid the worst pitfalls of that marital breakup and allow that person a bit of time to get back up on their feet.
Precisely, it would be a temporary accommodation until that person is able to secure a more permanent abode, either through in the public sector, if he or she, well, if he can afford it, or by waiting until the government gives him a permanent flat. There is a period of waiting, obviously, because the matter has to go through the allocation committee. The allocation committee has to involve the social services, and then once you are placed on the list, you've got to wait your turn. But in the meantime, you would be properly housed and not having to live, on charity as it is.
And having worked with you on some coverage, Henry, for GBC, I get the impression that the way you work is that you know that there are several commitments that the government has made and needs to deliver on, and you think that Action for Housing's role is to make sure that these commitments aren't forgotten and remind them about it sort of almost periodically, you know?
As a pressure group, that is our job. I mean, to put pressure on government and to remind them of the needs that there are, and to see that what they promise is delivered sooner or later. Otherwise, what is the role of a pressure group if not that?
And just to finish off, Henry, are you feeling optimistic on this question of a halfway home? Do you think that it might be delivered during this government's current tenure of office?
That is for the minister to say. I mean, we put the request, and then it's up to the minister to say whether the government is willing, prepared to do it, and then we'll see whether we feel optimistic or not.
All right. Henry Pinna of Action for Housing, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.